Good morning, everyone. Honorables, enlightened friends. Yes. Happy Mother's Day to all of you who have mothers, which would include all of us. In Tibet, they have a saying that when you admire someone for their compassion, you recognize that they have the mother loving kindness. They don't say father loving kindness, mother compassion, mother loving kindness. So this morning I'm going to talk about the third in a series of talks that I'm giving on the Sutra on Mindfulness of Inhalation and Exhalation, the Anban Shogi Jing. So I'm going to review just a little bit in case any of you missed the earlier versions of this. So I'm hoping that this third talk will be the next to the last on this particular subject, which is quite an interesting one. So let me just say that we'll do a quick review of parts 1 and 2. So the first thing to remember is that this particular text is a missing link between the original Anapanasati Sutta that you find in the Nikaya, MN 118, and the foundation of Zen practice in Japan. So we can call this a new meditation on the breath for a particular reason that I'm going to go into in a moment. There are two main versions of this text. One that which was actually translated. We don't have the original Sanskrit, but it was translated in the year 148 CE by Anshagao. And the version that we've had most of many of these years has been called the Da Anban Shogi Jing, the Great Sutra on mindfulness of inhalation and exhalation. And the reason is that text contained many, many commentaries. And the commentaries were put right into the text, so we never knew what was the original version and what was the commentary. So it was kind of confused, so it was kind of mixed up. No one knew the original. So this is why it was very long. And then in 1999, a clean version, actually two versions of this, were found in a monastery in Japan without any of the commentaries. So we know now what the original text probably was like. And this is called the Anban Shogi Jing. The K stands for the name of the text that they called it in Japan. So this particular text, whether it was the Anban or the Da Anban, this particular text had a great influence on many other meditation teachers, including Vasubandhu, who included the methods just as they are in the text of commentary on the Abhidhamma. And also we can see that Kumarajiva also in 401 wrote a text called the Jochan Shanmei Jing. And this is a sitting meditation, the Sutra on sitting meditation, concentration. And so this also includes almost verbatim the same methods that were found in the Anban, the 6 methods of breathing that were found in the original method. And then it was also, we can find it in its original format in Buddhaghosa, who added a few more sections, 8 sections altogether in his text. And then in the original version, almost identically in Master Ji of the Tiantai school, in his text on the sublime, the six sublime methods. And then also we have, then in the 13th century, we have Dogen and his disciple, Geizan, who also used this text as well. And when we go to a Zen monastery, you'll find that the method that they teach is a method of counting the breath, which goes all the way back to this particular text. You don't find any counting of the breath in the original teachings of the Buddha, but you find it here in this particular text. So the original Buddhist teaching on the Anapanasati is actually in 4 tetrads, each containing 4 parts, so we call it the 16 parts. And when most people are doing the meditation of breathing, when they say, oh, I'm doing Anapanasati, probably they're only doing the first tetrad, because to go into the second tetrad would require a person to have the ability to enter into the second jhana, which means that the mind is no longer involved in any kind of discursive thought. And that particular part of the mind is very quiet. So to enter into that kind of state requires lots and lots of training. So most people are not doing all the 16 parts. You can practice it, but the difficulty is being able to enter into those stages. So the very first part of the 4 methods that the Buddha taught had to do with breathing in long or breathing in short, which means basically, however you're breathing, you tune into your breathing, you notice how you're breathing. You don't judge it, you just say, oh, I'm breathing in long or short or coarse or subtle or whatever, and you just notice that. And you become sensitive to how your body is feeling while you're doing that kind of breathing, whatever your breathing is. And then you learn to calm the breath down. And those are the 4 parts that are included in the first tetrad. But here, in this particular text, the Sutra of Mindfulness of Inhalation and Exhalation, there's much more explained. And so there are different sections. So we're going to be talking a little bit today. We're going to be talking about the psychological temperaments or types and the antidotes to the difficulties that we run into in those particular types. But continuing with our review, An Chigao, very famous translator during the Han Dynasty. So he uses, obviously, Chinese of the Han Dynasty, and that's kind of tricky. I won't go into all of the difficulties related to this, but lots of tricky terms that are used that are not found in the Tang Dynasty. So kind of funny things sometimes emerge trying to translate An Chigao, so not so easy. So we're going to look at the psychological types today. But first, the original technique, which was taught by in the An Ban Shouyu Jing, has to do with 6 different methods of meditation on the breath, starting with counting. So one would inhale, say the number 1 in their mind, exhale, say the number 2, inhale, say the number 3, go all the way up to 10 and start again. This is the traditional Zen, Zazen method that is used in Soto Zen today. If you are a little bit more advanced, maybe you would just count the number 1 on the inhale and exhale, and then of course that would extend it, make it a little bit longer than you're staying focused. The second stage is called following, so you drop the counting altogether, and you're just focusing then on the inhalation, exhalation, the rising and ceasing. In the third stage, you're recognizing that whenever a thought emerges in the mind, you want to stop that thought. So you practice the method of being able to say, there's a thought, thinking, return to the breath over and over again until the frequency and intensity of those thoughts diminish, go down. Now, those are very traditional methods found in many of the teachings. They're embedded, other than the counting, they're found in the Buddhist teaching particularly. The next three have to do with the aggregates. So here, in observing and returning and purifying, what you're doing is step by step, disengaging the mind from being attached to the five aggregates: the form, feeling, thinking, mental formations, consciousness. So you're learning how not to identify with that as being some kind of reified self. And so you're doing that in some specific ways. I'm not going to get into that at this point. You can find on the YouTube channel, 6 Pathways to Happiness, you can find 2 meditations. The first one is 15 minutes just on parts 1 through 3, and then a 30-minute one that goes through all 6 parts, so you can actually practice the method if you're interested in doing that. The next talk that I gave was on how the 6 methods are related to the 37 factors of enlightenment. So each one is connected, and this is actually found right in the text. It makes a one-to-one correspondence between all of that. And I have a visual design here which goes into the different sections as well. So you can find this talk on both the 6 Pathways and also on the MABA site. So if you want to go back and learn a little bit more about that particular interconnection, you're more than welcome to do that. When I turned on the news this morning, as I normally do just to make sure the planet is still here, there was a story on the news today about Yale University, that the most popular course at Yale University is a course on happiness. And the professor didn't quite catch her name, but the professor was teaching mindfulness training, mindfulness of the breath, and then going into some other techniques, talking about savoring experience, which is a concept that was presented by Martin Seligman, although that wasn't necessarily talked about. And reminding people that there's going to be an international conference here at Washington University in the fall, in October, early October, on mindfulness and neuroscience. Washington U is trying to put together a Center for Mindfulness, which would include research, but also teaching mindfulness as an option for students. And they already have courses at Washington U on learning mindfulness, which is great. So happiness being kind of an important topic, the text called the 6 Pathways to Happiness, which I was involved in writing with a bunch of help from different people, available here. I used a diamond representation of different methods that people can use, pathways that people can use to hopefully attain higher levels of happiness, where they can do calming of the breath, they can do insight practice, vipassana, and also the Brahma Vihara, Apamana. They can go into the sublime states of the mind and do loving kindness, compassion, altruism, joy, equanimity. These are the mundane kinds of things that all of us can do. And then on a higher level, people can develop methods of concentration, methods to improve their wisdom, including the 37 factors of prerequisites, and also the bodhisattva path that lead to liberation. But all of this is based on the principles of a moral foundation, which are very important. So we can say that, that when we talk about having a moral foundation, we talk about having wholesome and unwholesomeness. These are the things that are really important for us to be able to distinguish between those. And when in the Da'anban and the Anban Shoyi Jing, when they're talking about psychological types, they're talking about this from the point of view of what is wholesome and what is unwholesome. What are the wholesome psychological things that we do for ourselves, and what can we learn about that can be an antidote to what is unwholesome. So in a review of the original Buddhist teachings, I put together a set of 6 unwholesome desires, kusala, which include, and this dovetails very nicely with Caddy's talk from last week, where we talk about the root craving of tanha, greediness. She called greed. It's a funny thing about Pali is sometimes difficult to translate because the words raga and lobha are used interchangeably. Sometimes the Buddha uses raga in a certain situation, sometimes lobha. They go back and forth, and so they have maybe subtle differences. And they're translated by different people with different words. Even sometimes the same word is translated differently by the same translator. Makes it a little bit of a challenge, but I like the word raga for greediness, and I like lobha for stingy coveting. In other words, you already have what you want, and you want to hold on to it. And then there is a sense-based desire, which is a kama, not to be confused with kama. This here kama is like Kama Sutra, the senses. So the sense doors have been opened without restraint, and we just desire more and more on a sensual level. And then there's another kind of word that's used by the Buddha called icho, which means entanglement, getting caught up like in a knot. When we talk about the ultimate freedom from these kinds of unwholesome things, we have to untie this knot. So there's quite a bit of use of this word icha in the text. And then finally, the wrong view of self. So these are the particular aspects that we look at when we see what it is that's unwholesome. And there are subsets of these kinds of things, as you can see, as well. So, for example, when we're looking at, greediness, we can see the greed can also include aversion and delusion as well. So, the monk Nanya Polika Terra, I believe he may have been one of the teachers of Bhikkhu Bodhi, but I'm not sure. He wrote a wonderful commentary on the antidotes for the 5 hindrances, remembering the 5 hindrances that are similar to the afflictions, just a little bit deeper, where the root of the afflictions come from the hindrances, where we have the tendency toward sense-based desire. The word chanda was talked about last week. One of the meanings of chanda, as Caddy said, was that it can either go wholesome or it can go unwholesome, but it also can be neutral. It just means a tendency toward. So kama chanda is the term that's used for the hindrance of getting stuck in sense-based desire. Vyapada, which is the tendency to go towards aversion, sloth and torpor, restlessness, remorse, and doubt, being these are the 5 hindrances, and that each one of them has a meditation method and things that you would do during your daily life. So for example, if you want to work on your sense-based desire, you want to do meditations on bodily impurity. So you do the meditation in Satipatthana, and when you focus on the body, you notice that, this body that we have is made up of all of these fluids under the skin, and that stuff is not so pleasant. And of course, the body will decompose as it gets older. Things go wrong. So it's not, the body is not something that's pure. So you focus on that and you say, oh, this is, so I don't want to just focus on something that's beautiful, recognizing that, yes, maybe it is, but I don't want to attach to it on that level. And then on our daily life, we can also see that things are not 100% pure. In the same way, when we're focusing on ill will, we would like to recognize meditation on loving kindness, but also on all of the Brahma Viharas, not just on loving kindness, compassion, altruism, joy, equanimity as well. And then we try to put that into practice in our daily life. So this is an example of the method of antidotes that is presented by a Theravadan teacher based on the original teachings of the Buddha. So these psychological temperaments, from the point of view of the Buddhism, have to do with what is wholesome and what is unwholesome. And these are discussed in I'm going to be talking about a few different texts here. The original one, obviously, the sutra on the inhalation and exhalation, but also a sutra on the sitting meditation by Kumara Jiva. Now, fortunately, we actually have a translation of that text. Makes life very easy. So, very nice. It goes through this. And also, the 6 Dharma gates for the sublime, or the 6 sublime Dharma gates by Master Zhi, also translated. And here, they've included the Chinese too. So in case you want to read the Chinese, you can do that as well. So these texts are available and very, very helpful, particularly if you can read Chinese and if you can read English. Now, my eyesight has been failing me, so yesterday, my wife, I paid her to reread this section to me in English. Tried to get her to read it to me in Chinese, not successful. But she reread this section to me that I'm going to be talking about today. So, the psychological temperaments and their antidotes, we're going to be talking about it from these different points of view. So the sutra on the concentration of sitting meditation by Kumara Jiva in 401, about the original text was written in 148, 150. You can see how many years between 150 and 400. So this particular method, as you can see, we can compare the sutra on mindfulness of inhalation and exhalation with the sutra on concentration of sitting meditation 400 years later, 250 years later. So we can see here craving, desire, and then we can see how it's connected to the issues of how to cure these different methods. And obviously talking about impurity to cure this lust, and focusing on loving kindness and compassion to cure anger, and focusing on the 12 links to cure one of ignorance. And then continuing on, the attachment to the self, practicing methods of learning how to not be so attached. Certainly looking at impermanence. And so these different methods, doubt and confusion, and these kinds of things we can look at, and we can see that both these texts are talking about the same kinds of things. Really remarkable that there's no real difference. And here, when we go all the way to the 6 sublime Dharma gates, now in the 6th century by Master Zhi, and we compare the 6 gates with the original Anban Choyi Jing, you see that the terms are almost identical, except Master Zhi adds the word for gate. So this is like a door or a gateway. So as we practice these things, we go through the gateway and we attain greater understanding. So you can see, identical. This is my notes, my outline. And here you can see that the 6 gates of, as a means of counteraction are presented by Master Zhi, so that each one of the methods, like the counting gate, we're looking at the method, which is to get rid of uncontrolled ideation, where vitaka and vichara are calmed and the monkey mind is conquered. So vitaka and vichara, these are the terms that are in Pali, which are meant to say, this is the beginning of thought and this is the sustained of thought. So a person learns to overcome that by doing the counting, so that the mind doesn't get so distracted by our ideation, by all of the thoughts that we have, all of that chattering in the mind. Practicing in the following gate, then dullness, scatteredness, and drowsiness is overcome. And this is done by not getting caught up in our memories, not letting our wandering mind take over, associating one thing with another, creating a storyline. So we want to learn how to overcome the tendency of the mind to kind of skip. We're having a thought, we skip to something else. We have another thought, we associate that with something else, we skip to that, and 10 or 15 minutes goes by, we no longer are aware that we're supposed to be meditating. Or the mind becomes very dim, drowsy and sleepy. In the stopping gate, this is where a person would like to learn how to keep the mind from wandering at all, the issues of urgency, coarseness, and rumination come into play. So particularly if you're sitting there and you feel like there's something urgent that you have to do, or you're ruminating about some kind of problem that you have, some kind of worry, then this becomes a problem. And so we notice the breath, and we notice how is the breath coarse, maybe rough, because we're caught up in this, and we try to smooth the breath. So we work on regularizing, smoothing the breath, so that whenever the mind goes to these kinds of things, we notice the effect that that has on the body, and we smooth that out by doing our breathing, inhaling, exhaling. You can even have the exhale be longer than the inhale, so that the breath becomes very calm and peaceful. In the observing gate, now we're moving more towards issues related to the aggregates. This is the three poisons get in the way of craving, hatred, and ignorance. And this is divided into some different parts. So in craving, of course, the impurity, again, comes up, consistent with all of the other teachings. And hatred and aversion, the four sublime mind states come up again. The practice of loving kindness, compassion, altruistic joy, equanimity. And you might think, well, how do I do this kind of practice? And again, on the YouTube channel, you can find meditations that I put up on loving kindness, similar to what we do here at MABA, compassion meditation, both in the Tibetan style and what I've been able to find from the Chinese style, mudita meditation on altruistic joy and equanimity meditations. So all of those meditations can be found so you can practice them. So I recommend that you start off with the loving kindness and compassion. Those are the two basic ones. Also, if you want to learn more about loving kindness and you want to get into that in greater detail, Sharon Salzberg has many books on this topic and meditations. She brought loving kindness meditation back from her years of practice in Burma and Thailand. And then also, in addition to that, Pema Chodron, who is in the Tibetan tradition, she has really good meditations on Tonglen, like compassion. So all of these things are available. Fortunately, the internet has lots of good resources. And also Tara Brach, also her work on the subject is very, very important as well. So the returning gate is the most complex of them all, and I had mentioned this before that I had attempted to try to get some information, greater information about this as well from Master Jiru, and when he gave me his translation of the section, I got even more confused. So I'm still working on that. But basically, the practice that is recommended is to focus on the 7 factors of enlightenment. So you focus on mindfulness is the first factor. Investigation of the Dharma, the second one, right effort, and going into the PT, the joyfulness and tranquility, and then into concentration and equanimity. So these 7 factors are things that we can practice. Maybe we don't do all of them all at once, but we can get there, and that will help us return back to the path. And then the purification practices also very helpful to get rid of our karmic obstacles, any kind of defiled thoughts that we have. This again is the development of, in actually the text. This is where I wanted my wife to reread this for me. Had to talk about the development of understanding the Nirmanakaya, the Sambhogakaya, and the Dharmakaya. So those three bodies of the Buddha. So we can go into that a little bit more next time when I talk about the final part of the Anbang Chogi Jing. So that concludes my talk for today. I hope you enjoy it and inspire you a little bit to do some practice in this regard. So may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings never be separated from the outbursts of joy, which is free from suffering. And may all beings dwell in the great equanimity, which is free from attachment and aversion.